That we got the long-awaited fight between Ben Askren and Demian Maia. One of the reasons why this fight was so hyped up is because it was a matchup between two of the most skilled grapplers in the UFC. You have a guy who is incredibly skilled in jiu-jitsu with Demian Maia. You've got an incredibly skilled wrestler and Olympian in Ben Askren. And so there was this question of if these guys actually do go against each other, what's it going to look like on the ground? We're used to seeing Ben Askren take pretty much everyone down. Once he gets them down, he's able to just control from top. Use sort of like a mix of folk-style wrestling and also Brazilian jiu-jitsu to pass people's guards to get wrist control, to get him in positions where he's able to ground and pound. And so the question was, does he want to take Demian Maia down? And if he does, how is he able to control from top? We've seen some jiu-jitsu matches from Askren in the past where he goes against some elite guys and he gets those guys down and they have a hard time doing anything about it and being able to sweep them, because oftentimes if you're going up on a sweep, oftentimes you're coming up on like a single leg or another wrestling type position. And from there, Askren's really good at finding ways to defend and even end up on top out of there. Part of the reason why he's got that funky nickname is because in college, he wasn't the most explosive guy or the quickest guy to get on other people's legs. And when people get in on his legs, he'd have to figure out creative ways to scramble out and not only just defend the takedown, but be able to score offense himself. And so with the help of Mike Ironman, he worked on a lot of different techniques that came to be known as like funk wrestling, where he was able to scramble off when someone had a single leg on him and end up on top and get the takedown on them. So the question here was going to be, does Demian Maia try to take the Askren down? If he does, do we get to see some funk wrestling from Askren? If Askren takes Maia down, does Maia try to come up on single legs like he does with most other guys? And if so, do we see some funk wrestling from Askren? And how is Askren able to defend the sweeps? And that's really not how the fight ended up going. Maia didn't really attempt to take Askren down at all. I think that's because he realized it just wasn't going to be the best idea for him. It wasn't going to be something that he could easily do. He also probably figured that he had an edge in the striking. For Askren, he seemed to be going on a strategy where he'd strike with Maia for the first 4 minutes of a round, and then for the fifth minute, he would then take Maia down, control from top, and then be able to secure the round that way. So the hope for him probably would have been, you do that 5 different times, you win 5 different rounds, 5 rounds to 0, you get the decision win. In the end, that did not end up working out for him. Ends up taking down Maia a little bit too early in the third round. Gets swept with starts off with I guess it'd be like a heel hook attempt. It was sort of like a leg lock position. Maia wasn't ever close to like a leg lock, but in doing so, he forced Askren to his back, got on top, was able to pass the guard, get to mount, get to the back, and then once he had his back, was able to sink in a choke and get the victory there, as you can see right here in this picture. So for me, going into this fight, what I knew about Ben Askren, I knew that he was a very skilled two-dimensional fighter with a missing dimension in the striking. Now, what I mean by that, your dimensions in fighting are typically going to be your striking, your wrestling / takedowns, and then your grappling / Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Ben Askren has excellent wrestling, as we all know. But one of the things that I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for is that he has excellent mat grappling as well. It's not as though he's like a high-level jiu-jitsu guy on the ground, but he does have very good jiu-jitsu. But he's also very good at using it sort of folk style wrestling, a lot of different like cross wrist positions to pass people's guards, to control them, to keep them from getting up, and to laying ground and pound. So there are a lot of very good wrestlers in the UFC. I think Yoel Romero would be a great example where he's a great wrestler, but once he gets the fight to the mat, it's not as though he's like particularly skilled at like passing someone's guard or submitting them or controlling or finding really good ground and pound positions. He's just good at getting it there, and he just kind of like hangs there and tries to land some shots while he's already there. That's not the case with Askren. Askren is very good on top as well, very good mat grappler as well. So for him, I knew going in that he was a great wrestler. I knew going in that he was very good on top. Didn't really know what he was like off his back, assuming he'd even get there. And then striking-wise, it was like, look, he's probably, at the very least, he's not going to shoot in recklessly on Maia because he doesn't want to get caught in a guillotine. So we're going to learn a little bit more about his striking. What I'd seen from his striking before, especially in the open workouts, was just not impressive at all. You'd rate it like on a scale of 0 to 10, probably like around a 1. What we actually saw, and if you look at the numbers here, total strikes landed ended up being 102 to 84. Significant strikes was 63 to 69. So Maia, I guess, had the edge in significant strikes there, according to this count. But what I saw, and I really noticed it here in the second round, yes, Ben Askren isn't the most explosive guy, definitely not the most technical striker, but he's not as bad as he looked in the striking either. One of the things that kind of impressed me, and to an extent it's sort of like a bit of a basic read, but it's still a read that he made, is that in the second round he started to realize that Demian Maia, oftentimes when he would get into striking exchanges, would lead with the rear hand, or he would lead with the left, oftentimes either with a looping overhand or with a straight. And so Askren, first off, he made that identification. He noticed a pattern in Maia's striking. So first off, if you're not a good striker, you oftentimes don't notice patterns, even if it's a simple pattern like this. Second off, he knew what to do off of that, which again, that's worth giving him some credit for. And then third off, he actually executed on that. So he was reading Maia coming in with those straight lefts over and over, was finding ways to get his head off the center line, avoid those shots, landed some overhands of his own, landed a handful of really nice uppercuts as well. And in that second round, Maia definitely got busted up pretty bad by Ben Askren, who was doing a good job of making his reads on Demian Maia strikes. So there was a shot that Maia landed, but here you can see like Askren busted him up pretty good. This is one of those straight rights that he was able to time there. So there were actually some moments there from Askren where, granted, the technique wasn't exactly that sharp, but the reads were there, the accuracy was there, the timing was there. Like, I didn't know that his striking was at the level that he showed at in this fight. And that's not to say that he has high-level striking, but it's better than I expected. So going in, I had him at like a 0 or a 1 in his striking. Maybe now you have him at more of like a 2 or a 3, which is still showing me that he's better there than I thought. In the wrestling, he is what I thought he was. He's still great. In the grappling, it was a little odd that with both sweeps, both on the omoplata and then also on the leg lock, that he didn't seem to fight as hard once he had his back touch the mat to get back up. I think part of that is that as a wrestler, oftentimes when you try to fight your way back up, you expose your back, and he knew with Demian Maia that would be a terrible idea to do that. But also, once he was on his back, it's not as though he was like trying to play a closed guard and stall. He was just kind of keeping an open guard, wasn't really that active with butterfly hooks or anything, and as a result, he got his guard passed pretty quickly. It is worth crediting him, though, that in the second round, he got past an amount and was able to not only just escape them out, but also escaped and came up on top. With Demian Maia, you almost never see anyone, once they're mounted or once they have their back taken, get out of that position unless the round ends or unless they tap out. So for Askren to actually escape that in the second round, that deserves some credit. So there's that as well for Ben Askren. I expected probably a little bit more from him off his back, but the thing is with most guys, you're not going to get Ben Askren on his back. So I guess that's the one area where I feel like I could have expected a little bit more of Ben Askren, but the striking was better than what I expected. The wrestling was still very good. The grappling on top, I mean, you're dealing with Demian Maia. This is a different situation than most guys he's going to fight. So while a lot of people are like, oh, wow, look how bad he looked, I don't think Ben Askren looked that bad at all. The striking looked better than I expected. The wrestling looked great. The grappling, I mean, he's dealing with Demian Maia. This is a different level of jiu-jitsu. And Maia showed some new things that I hadn't seen from him in a while. We're used to seeing Demian Maia try to come up on single legs for his sweeps. And in this case, he was just attacking submissions and using submissions for his sweeps instead. So whether it was the triangle to omoplata, which he used to sweep in the second round, or whether it was the leg attacks that he attempted in the first round and that didn't work out for him, but in the third round, he was successful in going for a leg and then coming up on top. That was some new stuff from Maia, at least in the UFC, stuff that we haven't seen from him as much, and it was effective. But to me, for the people who are trying to rip on Ben Askren here and say that he's been overrated this whole time, first off, I really hope that you weren't 12 hours later talking about how great Douglas Lima is and how Douglas Lima should be in the UFC and how he'd be a top 5 talent right now, because Ben Askren had a dominant win over Douglas Lima. And yes, Lima is a fantastic fighter, and I do think that he'd be one of the top guys in the welterweight division. But if you're going to rip on Ben Askren and say that he's a joke and he was never good, and then talk about how great Douglas Lima is in the same 24-hour period of time, like you might want to kind of open your eyes up and realize what you're doing right there. Askren's still a phenomenal fighter. He's still very good in 2 dimensions. Right now, one of the guys who's looked at as a top pound-for-pound fighter, Khabib Nurmagomedov, in some ways and similar, is that he's fantastic in the wrestling dimension, fantastic in the mat grappling dimension. Definitely further along in his striking than Askren is, but still, if that's a guy who you're going to view as one of the best guys in the world, and then you're looking at Ben Askren like he's a joke and he's a nobody and doesn't have any skill at all, it tells me that you don't really have a great grasp on how good Ben Askren is and where Ben Askren's skill set is. Yes, Ben Askren lost this fight, but no, it's not as though this was like an easy style matchup for him. Ben Askren's a guy who likes to take guys down and control them. Giving him a guy who is just a world champion, world-class black belt on the ground is not an easy style matchup at all. Had his moments. I'm sure he at least got one, if not both of the first 2 rounds. Pretty sure he got the second round for sure, even though he ended up being mounted for a brief period of time there, but was definitely landing a lot of shots on the feet. So to me, does this mean that Ben Askren's a bust? No. It was a tough matchup. He had his moments. Maia had his moments. Maia's a great fighter too. Maia ended up finishing in a way that he's finished a lot of other great fighters. So to me, this doesn't really do anything to Ben Askren's stock. If anything, I feel like how good I thought Ben Askren was going in versus how good I feel he is coming out. I actually feel like Ben Askren's a little bit better coming out than I thought he was going in, even though he did take the loss here. And that's in large part to seeing more of his striking than what we had seen in the past. As far as people saying that UFC lost the trade with one, I'm sure Ben Askren has sold quite a lot more than Demetrius Johnson ever had. And the people who are saying they miss DJ, I'm not even sure how many of those people have even watched DJ fight and won. So this is a business. Ben Askren has done much more business than DJ has. So yes, DJ is a more accomplished fighter, but I don't feel like this is like a grand like a slam dunk that won that trade.